friends, welcome to the show. It's me, Curtis G. Tonight I'm sharing something new. I've been working on this podcast and I'm looking for a name for it. I'm thinking like either Curtis and Friends and Family, Curtis, Friends and Family, Curtis and Friends, Curtis and Family. I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun. The first guest is a gentleman that I've known pretty much all my life, Steve Camp. And there's three type podcasts I want to do. One is where we tell these stories. And you'll see that as you watch it. The next one is yoga journeys. Like I love yoga and what it's done for me. And the third one is because I've been working with these nonprofits this past year, I'm learning about funding. So I want to help nonprofits get funding. So I'm bringing people on to tell us how to go about funding your nonprofit. Anyway, I hope you like what's happening. We got one more show to go before the year's out. Wow, I believe 2023 is about to end. Peace, spread love. Hope you enjoyed the show. Our podcast. I'm out. And welcome to the podcast that is yet to be named. I've just sent the invitation to my childhood friend, still a friend, Steve Camp. I see he's in the admitting room right now, so let's bring him in. I'm so excited. Here comes Mr. Camp right now. Steve? Whoops, let me see. Let me put my glasses on because I can't see. There we go. Here's Steve. There's Steve.
There we go.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Fantastic. Happy Monday, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I got to tell the audience that I owe everyone an apology, including you. We had a malfunction with the tape last week. So the first podcast is now the second podcast. Is that okay?
Okay.
So for those who are watching, I wanted to have Steve as my first guest on this podcast. And as I was explaining to the audience before, Steve, that it is the podcast that does not have a name yet. So we're looking for that. And Steve, for those of you watching and listening, is the friend from my childhood that I keep in touch with most. Stephen, you correct me if I say things that are wrong, right? You and my brother Jeffrey were like best friends, right? When you were a
Yes,
kid.
we were.
And I get chills when I think about it because we lost Jeff about 8 years ago. And it's funny because, I live out here on the West Coast, Steve, and sometimes I still pick the phone up to call Jeffrey, and I realize, I got to call him another way, right? So talking to you is also bringing fond memories of Jeffrey. And Steve and I did this last week, y'all. So I'm gonna try to recreate it. However, you could never do things the same way you once did them. I had this beautiful red apple that I picked up at the farmer's market last Thursday when Steve and I first interviewed. And the reason I had that apple because it just was so serendipitous that my culinary career was started because my dad and Steve's dad. And share the story. Our dads were best friends too when they were kids, right, Steve?
Exactly. They used to work on cars together, all that sort of thing.
Isn't that wild?
I guess, yeah.
So,
and then of course we lived right across from one another, so we just had some great childhood times.
Yeah, and I'm thinking right now, my daddy, your dad were buds, right? And your grandfather, was it Joe as well? Was he Joe Sr. or?
My granddad's name was Alex. You wouldn't know him because he passed away when I was about 6 or 7 years old.
I think I vaguely remember him, or maybe I remember the stories of Dad and your dad talking about him, right? Because
Could be.
this is when like Conyers, Georgia, right? Our families have been there for a long time. So our dads were friends. I believe their dads were friends too. Granddaddy George and your granddad Alex, right?
It could have been. I don't know for sure.
Because they all go back. We all go back a long ways in Conyers, and it's just funny. So this podcast idea came about because I'm a granddad now, and I hear you're a granddad as well, right?
Right.
How many times?
11 strong. Got 11 of them.
11 of them, right? So if I asked you to name them, could you do it all without messing up, or would you
I
be like,
could, but just don't ask me for ages and birthdays and any of that stuff.
I love it.
I,
I love it.
I have to go through a roll call when I'm trying to call one of their names, you know.
I love that, brother. It's so funny. Like I'm thinking, remember when mom and dad get mad and they call you every child's name except your own, right? It's like
Yeah.
crazy, and this is different than it was last week. But this apple, I was telling a story about the apple. It was called an Arkansas Black, Steve. This apple, and it took me back to my childhood when your dad and my dad would take us to the farmers market. You want to share that story, or you want to let me just wear your ears out?
Go ahead. You got it.
Well, when we were younger, and I don't know if Steve remembers as much as I do because it left a big impression on me. I think the first time I went to the market, your dad drove, and then it was kind of a rotating thing back and forth. And I used to love going to the farmers market. I didn't know that years later this would have an impact on my life. So I'm out here in California and trying to make this story short because I want to hear more from you than me. It's back and forth. But when I was looking for or trying to create a business that I could do with that I knew I could do, I thought about those visits to the farmers market and seeing all that gorgeous fresh produce and thinking that, wow, people in Marin County don't go to the farmers market. So I started talking to restaurants and small stores about, hey, I'll go to the market and I'll buy your produce for you, so you don't have to pay so much to these other people, or come in the grocery store and buy your produce. And it caught on, Steve. And there was a time I had about 120 customers. Jeffrey came out here and worked with me. Jupe came out here and worked with me. I had a great business going in my early 20s. And it goes right back to Veal Street and Camp Street, your pops, my pops, taking us to the farmers market. So, isn't that wild?
Yeah, I can recall, them going out there. They would buy bushels of beans and peas and peaches and all that stuff, and we'd be on the back porch there, snapping beans and all that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and there's nothing like fresh vegetables. Nothing like it.
Nothing like it. Still isn't. Wow. It's amazing. So, there's so much I want to try to cover. I'm going to try to keep these to like a 30-minute podcast. We're going to break them into 10-minute segments, I should say, and roll them out slowly. So, do you want to tell us about Joe Kemp, the great dude he was? He was kind of a pillar of the neighborhood,
Yeah, well, he was. I guess as I mentioned to you last week, he started out in the TV business. He used to be a television repairman, after he got out of the Army. And he had a little shop there on Bryant Street.
Yeah.
And he did that for a little while, but that wasn't satisfying for him, because he was working with cars and stuff too. And, he just kind of gravitated to working on cars full time. Just like your dad, they all, they did a lot of shade tree mechanicing before.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And, yeah, he did a lot of that, and he finally got his own shop. I guess the last 15 or 20 years of his life, I guess, he had his own shop before he passed away.
I don't know, and that's why I'm looking forward to these type of conversations, and I look forward to speaking with the Levitts and the Cars and other family members. And I say family because where we live, the area called the Flats, right? In Veal Street and Camp Street. And there was a creek that ran between us. And there was also, when we were young kids, there was a forest, right?
Exactly. That was our adventure there.
That was our adventure land. Yeah, that was true adventure land, right? And we would run those woods and climb those trees. I remember, and this is something, I was somewhere hiking recently. And I said, you remember those old vines that we'd hang, swing? I saw one.
Vines.
Yeah, I saw one of Steve, and I wanted to cut the bottom and swing on it. And I thought, no, my big butt will fall through that thing, right? But it's like after our conversation last week, it just really hit me. And over the weekend, I was thinking, I said, I wonder if Steve and his brothers and sisters know how much impact their mom and dad had on my life, right? And because I think about Buddy, right? Steve's dad. His nickname around was Buddy Kemp, right? And the year after high school, I graduated, that summer, well, no, it was the summer before that, my junior year. I worked with Buddy and Randolph at the shop, right? Over because I didn't know nothing about fixing cars. My dad,
Mhm.
both my brothers could fix cars. And I thought, okay, for me to learn something about cars, I need to get down and dirty, right? So I
Mhm.
worked with Buddy, and I used to love to hear him talk story, you know?
Mhm.
But he would share stuff to you. And I know it's like it for whatever reason, it's like I love my dad and respected the heck out of him. However, he and I didn't have great conversations until he came out here with me to come visit here, right? So then me
Mhm.
and me could really talk. And I remember saying to him one time, I said, "So, Dad, so why is it that we get along so well when you're out here? We could talk about everything." And he looked at me and he goes, "I'm on vacation." Right? It's like when I'm at home, I'm in the grind, right? I'm on the grind. I got to take care of y'all. But out here, you're a grown man now. Stephen, I love that. Did you ever have any kind of epiphanies like that with your dad? Or, I'm like,
Uh, uh, well, we kind of had our moments. I know at one time he was talking to me about wanting me to. Well, Dwight also. Well, all my brothers wanted us to take over his shop, but we were all through with that. Because he would have us up there on Saturdays. Turning wrenches, and while we were doing that, we were hating it. But I'm glad I got that exposure. That experience. Now that I'm a grown man, saving myself a lot of money.
a lot of money, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and
Go
yeah.
ahead.
But he used to. We used to talk. Sometimes. I I know one thing. I he would never talk to me about his army experience. He didn't really ever want to talk about that, and that's something I wished I knew more about what that was like for him. You know.
It's something you say that. So may I ask, and of course you don't have to answer anything, but this is what I really want to do. This is the kind of stories I want to share. Like, oh, these are for my grandson and for his children. And I heard a quote the other day. I want to be the ancestor that my descendants are proud of. And it
Mm-hmm.
really impacted me, Steve. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, who's the best way to start this out with is someone that from a little boy, from a young boy, right? Because I never was a little dude. So you mentioned how Buddy by Joe Camp wouldn't talk about his army experience, and I was proud of him, and I didn't know much. I just knew he had served, and Dad
Mm-hmm.
talked about this one time, and Dad said, yeah, he didn't qualify for whatever reason, but he was
Mm-hmm.
always so proud of Buddy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Buddy and Joe Camp are the same person, so he didn't talk to you much about your army experience. Did you share much of yours with your kids, your experience in the service?
Yeah, I really do. I share everything actually. I mean, to this day, I'm always taking my little grandkids over there in Old Town and stuff, showing them stuff that how life was with us back in the day, and what different things was where
Yeah,
my dad used to work over there and all that sort of thing. And I'm like you, man. I feel like I need to share those things with
I love it.
the
Yeah.
kids, with the
You
younger
know,
generation.
with the young, I agree. It's like, Black folk, and I'm saying that, it's like we always had an oral history because we weren't literate as a whole. There were a lot of reading and very literate people of color, Black people, African descendants. However, many of us, like myself, I think I shared this with you last week, I didn't learn to read till I was in my 20s. No, you didn't know that when you was a kid, right? You didn't know that.
I sure didn't. I didn't have a
So,
clue. No, I didn't.
so I, although we have become much more literate, like you and I were talking about earlier, how the kids are so much smarter, there's still something to be said for this oral history. And the reason I want to do this is because Granddaddy George died a week before I was born. I know very little about him, Steve. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my granddad on my mom's side, Granddaddy Curtis, Will Hendricks Curtis, I used to spend all my summers with him. And I'd go up there to Dassville and I know him now. When I talk about him, his beautiful black face comes to my mind, right? And however, he died on my 12th birthday, right?
Mm.
So I have this real connection to both my granddads, and I want my grandson, and I'm glad to hear you say like you want your grandkids and their kids to know your story. So this, I want to be testament to what two brothers from Conyers grew up to be and hopefully are still growing into, right? So tell me
Mm-hmm.
something that if them grandbabies are going to say, I didn't know granddad did that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I told you last week. I got a couple of them there they're over in Japan right now, so I don't have much time with them right now. But as my daughter's children, they're here all the time, and so uh, like I say, we'll stroll over to Old Town every now and again, and around Conyers. I think a couple of weeks ago I was showing them Rockdale over there, Rockdale High,
Yeah,
showing where I went to high school.
I
Just
love
telling
it.
them all about that. Yeah, yeah,
What they
and
think.
oh man, I just love how they're hinged on my every word. When I'm telling them about stuff like that. We stopped by my grandmother's buried over there off of what's the street that runs by
Not
Rockdale.
Pine Log. No, is that it? Pine Log?
I can't remember the name of the
Yeah,
street.
I think it's
Anyway,
Pine Log. Yeah.
the big cemetery that's right over there. Okay, well, my
Yes. Yeah.
grandmother,
Uh-huh.
yeah, she's buried over there. So I took them over there, and my great grandfather, a lot of my family is over there, and so I was showing them that and telling them all about their ancestors.
I love
So yeah, it's amazing. Like I say, they're little sponges. They take it all in.
I'm
They
looking
really
forward
do.
to when Graham is older and I can take him back there and show him, where we played.
Hmm.
Regina, my oldest sister. So in my family, I'm going to name mine off. Then I want you to name yours off. It was Eddie Jr. and Regina, Laura Regina, Jeffrey Sterling, then Pony. That's my nickname, everybody. Curtis George, Sophia, we call her Kitty Cat. Then Portia, who was the baby, and she still thinks she's the baby. Portia Renice. Your family. Roll them out, Steve.
Well, you remember my oldest sister, Barbara. We called her Bob.
Right.
And then that was me, Steve. Then after me came my brother Randolph. We called him Rand.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was Angela. We call her Ann. And that's Dwight. And then Junior, my youngest brother.
And so Measure A, yes, is a big program supporting parks and open space, and so you see the signs all over, and it's a quarter-cent sales tax, and that adds up. So in around a year,
1/4 of a penny.
1/4 of a penny in a year generates around $16 million in Marin County.
Wow.
Little bit adds up.
Wow. Okay, that's bigger than I thought, right?
It's big, yeah.
Okay, and this Measure A, right? Again, Measure A is the big bubble. You're part of Parks, and you have a smaller part of that bubble. May I? Or is that a good way to say it?
Yeah, that's a great
Okay.
way to say it. So
Okay.
Parks Measure A, which funds all of the parks things, that's around 16 million a year, depending on how much we all buy locally.
Right.
And then the program we're discussing today, which supports all kinds of food and agriculture projects through grant funding,
That's the fair grant.
that's the fair grant.
Okay, gotcha. So that's pulled out of that big old pie, that big old part. We got fair grant, and that's where and help me because I'm really trying to grasp it myself. So all the nonprofits or churches or whatever it is who have ideas to get food to where it needs to be can apply for these funds from the fair grant.
Yeah. So we have the big umbrella of Parks Measure A. Then within that, there's an agriculture part, and within that, there's the fair program. With all these nestled parts.
Wow, I love it.
But so when you think about Parks Measure A and the $16 million, the fair grant is 6% of Parks Measure A. So
Gotcha.
It's a little piece.
Gotcha.
But it's my whole world.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
a
what we're
little
talking
piece.
about.
However, it's a dramatic piece
It's
for those of
exciting.
us who want to bridge this gap with food insecurities. Is
Yes.
that fair to say?
Yeah, and so what's really interesting about this program, the Fair Grant, is it can support so many different aspects of agriculture and the food system. So we could be talking about supporting food equity goals that have been discussed in communities,
Yeah.
and that could look like increasing access to affordable, healthy foods. It could look like supporting food-based micro-businesses to generate, workforce development opportunities, while also generating, a broader variety of culturally appropriate, healthy foods in the neighborhood.
I love how you're saying this, and it's interesting because, culturally appropriate foods, right? That's big, and I love that we're starting to have these type of conversations in and around Marin County about what's culturally appropriate. Whether you're in West Marin, Marin City, the Canal, or parts of Novato, where there's ethnic, there's diversity, and then there's like that area where there's really like a concentration of one ethnicity, right? And that needs to be fed as well. Is that fair to say? I mean, we have to be nowadays really careful and mindful about. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to be labeled as just being PC. The truth is, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings because mine have been hurt so much in my life, So I know how it feels when someone steps on your heart. So I don't want to do that. And I love that we can have this conversation. Is it? Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of amazing conversations happening now around food equity. And we're all in our journey of, what language we're using and what we're, learning about our own blind spots, and it can be challenging. So I, invite anyone who I may unintentionally or who I may hurt to let me know.
Right.
So I can educate myself. I
love that. It's like, okay, it's not your job to teach me nor mine to teach you. However, if I wrong you and I don't know it, I've got to find out what it, so I don't do it again. If that this is, you and I are becoming friends, and I want everyone to know that, right? I like the work you do, and if I say something that's not right, you got to please call me on it in this adventure we're trying to dabble into, because as a chef, as a culinary professional, as someone who has written books about food, about gardening, about I want to share this knowledge. My dad was not an educated man. However, he was a very intelligent man. And one of the things I'll never forget, he said to me, he says, son, if what you know dies with you, you didn't really know it. I'm like, wow, that's one of those things. It's like, he's right. If we don't pass along that knowledge, it's like, and now you and I both have knowledge about funding food. I don't know what we got to come up with a name for this kind of this journey, right?
We'll work on that.
We got to work on it. Funding food may not be it, but it's what we're trying to do. So how do people access the FAIR grant?
Mm-hmm.
Did I say it right?
Yep.
How would someone in Marin County access that?
Yeah. So first, I want to go back just for a second. We were talking about some of the things that the FAIR grant can support.
And there's water for you. If you feel free, whenever you. Yeah.
And I think I didn't touch on some of the kind of more agriculturally oriented elements. So we could be looking at, the resilient ecosystems part of the acronym, like stream restoration on agricultural lands and things like that. So that demonstrates some of the wide range of topics the program can support. Like
Friends of the Novato Creek.
So, well, it's interesting because it would be mostly around supporting ecosystem resilience and natural resource values on agricultural working lands.
Okay. Yeah. Farmlands, got it. So, okay. So that's interesting because when I first think about the resilience, my mind goes, okay, well, I know this group that I'm not involved with, but they do restoration with the creeks and the wetlands over there. However, if they were a aqua farm, they could access that. Or is
right.
that okay.
Yeah. So it's about kind of producing food or restoring the ecosystem where food is produced. Yeah.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. So we can have people from West Marin, North Marin, all over that have similar projects. What's the step? What do? We go to the website. How do we access this funding? If that's
absolutely. So if you go to parks.marincounty.org.
Parks.marincounty.org. Okay, yeah. I'll try to put that in when we.
Great. And I can give you the longer link for the online access, and you'll see there the banner for I think it's either called FAIR Grant or Food Agriculture Resilient Ecosystems Grant. One of those.
One of those.
The long version or the short version. There's a pretty picture of vegetables.
I love pretty pictures of vegetables.
Yes, it's the only part of the park's website that has vegetables.
I love it.
So click on that, and that has the information.
Okay, fantastic. Any tips for potential grant applicants? I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first step is to make sure that you're eligible to apply.
Okay.
So nonprofits, government organizations, school districts. So where some of the trickier areas might be a community-based organization that does not have nonprofit status, or a farmer who
he or she or they can't.
They
right.
run their farm business. And that doesn't mean they can't be involved in the program. It means that's an opportunity to partner with an eligible organization.
Got it.
So in that case, the first step would be to connect with a partner who's eligible, like a nonprofit. And if, for those who may not have that connection already, get in touch, because we may know of others who are working on a similar topic or geographic area. So the first step, make sure you're eligible. Make sure what you're thinking about is a good match for the Measure A goals and language. So agriculture, food systems.
Love it. So let's hold that. So to break it down like us for us slow folks, like who like slow food, right? So if I'm a farmer, I'm Farmer Curtis up in Novato, and I've got like 1.5 acres. And I'm like, wow, I sure could use some of this Measure A. However, I'm not a nonprofit. So what I do is look at a church or any food group and say, hey, here's what I want to do on my acre plus land. Would you partner up with me so that you could be my physical sponsor? Is it physical sponsor? Fiscal, like money. So that, I can write my proposal, they present it, we work together on that, right? And that's kind of breaking it down for us.
Yeah, yeah. And the nonprofit partner, in addition to being a fiscal partner, fiscal sponsor, because it's required and all of that, it's also a great opportunity for substantive partnership, because that can be a great way to look into ways that work. If we're looking at conservation work on private land, the environmental benefits have benefits to us all.
I love that. Yes.
And are there ways to look at additional ways to incorporate community participation or benefits? And a nonprofit may be well positioned to help a farmer explore options that work for their operations. So, is that school field trips? Is it Conservation Corps or another workforce development opportunity supporting implementation of conservation work, or depends on the project. But a nonprofit partner can be a thought partner as well.
Love it. Boom. Chef Curtis here. Hope you enjoyed our first podcast on Marin's Measure A and the FAIR Grant. If you have questions, please send them to me, chef@curtisaikens.net. I'll try to find the answers for you. Tell friends about the podcast. We're trying to help bridge the gap with food insecurities all across Marin County. Spread love.